Week 4 Sunday of the NFL season in the books, and some really interesting teams making statements. The Baltimore Ravens rejoined the party in 2024, knocking off the Bills. And what about the Washington Commanders? We cannot ignore that offense anymore. All that and more coming up on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Appreciate all the everydayers out there and all the new listeners to P&W Daily right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Making us your first listen, and make sure you also subscribe on YouTube or wherever you are listening to this podcast. Today's episode of P&W brought to you today by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first ticket purchase. All right, the one freshest in our minds, Matt, is the last game, the Sunday nighter, and it was the Baltimore Ravens who just ran all over the Buffalo Bills. And, man, the Bills had looked awesome in the first 3 weeks of the season, and they made Josh Allen look human in this game while also running the ball to nearly the tune of 200 yards for Derrick Henry, but Justice Hill going crazy as well for you fantasy owners. So dual halfback value in your fantasy leagues for the Baltimore Ravens, getting back to what they do. This is the Baltimore Ravens team we thought we'd see. And to be honest with you, preseason, I think it was kind of the Buffalo Bills team we thought we'd see, where Josh Allen was having a little bit more trouble with his new young receivers and trying to get that offense on track, because it looked phenomenal, surprisingly phenomenal, the first few weeks of the season. So interesting where these teams are now after 4 weeks of the season. Baltimore at 2-2, the Buffalo Bills now at 3-1, 35-10 win for the Ravens on Sunday night.
Yeah, I want to start with the Bills super quick, because I think the Ravens are the bigger story. Is that it's awful tough when you're in that environment and the first play of the game is a 80-yard Derrick Henry untouched touchdown or whatever. I mean, you're playing from behind. Yeah. I mean, like, wow, Tyson just hit me with 43 seconds in the first round, and I got to get back and redeem myself in that environment. But I thought they did. I thought they clawed back into it, and though the final score doesn't show it, I actually live bet them at plus 420 at a point when they were losing, until they threw that stupid backwards pass to Josh Allen trick play that just got blown up and ended up just destroying the comeback in the game. Like, why are you getting cute? You know, your quarterback's playing great. His numbers weren't phenomenal, but Allen made 4 or 5 wow throws, and he was starting to feel it, and they were starting to figure things out, and then they go and do that. But the Ravens are the story, you know, and I'm not particularly worried about the Bills, except their defense is playing with some backups, and they love to play nickel, and this isn't a great matchup for them with Ricard and Kohler, and you might as well drop Andrews in fantasy at this point, side note, you know, but they're just putting the biggest people on the planet out there. But Harbaugh's a great coach. I mean, he's got this offensive line figured out. They lost so many defensive coaches that I think they're starting to get their legs under them on that side of the ball, and it's looking like last year's offense. Early in the season, they weren't nearly this dedicated to Henry in the run game, and that made no sense to me. But now they understand. And boy, I mean, this might be an exaggeration, but in terms of ball carriers, I can't remember a better lightning and thunder combination than these two.
Right, with Justin Hill catching the ball out of the backfield. Yeah. Nice little move on the Bills safety, and just made him look kind of silly on that touchdown catch. And Lamar doing Lamar things as well. It's a fun game, but I think you kind of touched on it. For the Buffalo Bills, it's just the wrong matchup for them and the way they want to play and the way they have been playing. And, you know, good sign for the Baltimore Ravens to remind everybody that they're still here, and, you know, the weird start to the season, but figuring things out, both sides of the ball. Derrick Henry 24 carries, that's what you want to see. And with you know, with the Bills, you're just like, okay, let's just hope we don't see Baltimore in the playoffs, and then we'll be okay. Because maybe this is just the one team that's not a great matchup for the Buffalo Bills this year.
I tend to think that, but I'm not super worried about the Bills. I mean, I think they're still a contender, but I believe Baltimore is a contender, even though their record wasn't great to start the season.
It's also a good reminder of the way things go in the NFL and why it's like a small sample week to week. You can't hang too hard on what you saw from a team. Like the team in week 3 isn't really, in September is not going to be the same team in January. And one game can get sideways quick. And that's what happened here with, Derrick Henry, 80-yard run. What if you get that fit up and you stop him and it's a 3-yard run instead? Okay. And then how does that change the game? And does the complexion of the entire game change from jump, basically? And, you make an extra play on offense and, now it's a 1-score game. And it's much closer than the 35-10 score that was on the final scoreboard.
Then we saw Trubisky in at the end, and I mean, there was some, they waved the white flag and said, maybe we'll meet another day,
A couple of good teams, though, I think, is the takeaway.
Playoff teams.
Right.
Yeah.
And for the Ravens, it's good to show it against another team that's probably a playoff team. And so it was like, okay, now we're on. Let's go. First month of the season done. No more extended preseason. Let's go. It's on now. We're getting into October football.
And they needed it more. I mean, if it had went the other way, we'd be like, oh, no, let's worry about the Ravens.
Oh, no doubt. Right. Yeah. And we were kind of ready to crown the Bills after last week. We're like, let's give Josh Allen the MVP. And like, this team looks awesome. And so, yeah, things can change.
I was considering putting one in power ranks. I think we can't do that now, but I'm not sure who I would, We'll
talk about the Kansas City Chiefs remain unbeaten. The Bills aren't the only team that got their first loss of the season, more on the Steelers as well. And those teams that did remain unbeaten, like the Minnesota Vikings. Can we go first, though, to the Washington Commanders?
Absolutely.
This offense is, it's
real.
It's hard. You can't not believe it now. It's been too many weeks in a row. And then you got the Cliff Kingsbury, who got the game ball after the game from Dan Quinn with the revenge game against the Arizona Cardinals, which might add a little bit to this. So, the Cardinals defense, I think, is a defense that's under-talented and it's kind of played pretty well. And, and both these teams are actually similar in, how they have a dual-threat quarterback and, maybe missing some pieces on what their final defense is going to look like with their build. But maybe the Commanders are a lot closer than we thought, because if you're putting 40 points a week on teams, it doesn't matter if your defense is that great.
One punt for Washington, which is like more than their average. It's amazing.
Last week.
Right. I mean, they're so efficient. And a lot of that's the quarterback. He's really, really accurate with the football. He makes good decisions. They give him pathways out of trouble, whether it's a dump off to a running back or just use your legs. I mean, it's a really good rookie plan. The O-line's out kicking its coverage. Both these defenses are under-talented, but I thought Johnny Newton being in this game and that defensive tackle rotation was something really to build on, at least on that side of the ball. And I also, 216 rushing yards, that's legit. I mean, Brian Robinson churning out yards and
that's with Austin Eckler out in this game.
And
he's been a big part of the offense too. And he's a nice little key. I love that dual running back situation too. And Jeremy McNichols was able to jump in there and look just fine in that Eckler role and even scored a couple of touchdowns. But the Robinson Eckler, and I hope Eckler's not out for a long time. I don't even know what his injury is, but I just know he was out this week.
I think it was a concussion. I think he's back soon.
Okay, good. That's good news then for the Washington Commanders. Look, the offense, I think it's time to officially say there's not a problem there. Can they slow teams down enough? But man, and the big thing, you laid it out there, and we had talked about it with Bo Nix, and the way he had looked early, even from preseason games and early in the season. They're veteran quarterbacks in that they've played a lot of college football, and it's hard to transition into the NFL. But it's like, okay, they've seen a lot in their lives. They've played a lot of downs of football, and then you get the ball out quick, and they're kind of swimming and treading water and not sinking. And for Bo Nix, it's going a little different than Jayden Daniels, obviously, and get the ball out of his hands quick. But then on top of that, Matt, and so there's some efficiency there. And Jayden Daniels is 82% passer right now. I mean, it's crazy.
It's crazy. Yeah.
He's got as many touchdowns as incompletions just about on this season, which is insane for a rookie quarterback in the first month. And so you're seeing all these, first 4 games of their career, and it's like Jayden Daniels won, Pat Mahomes too, and so it's pretty insane what he's doing. But on top of like the efficiency stuff and getting the ball out quick, and they're manufacturing this to make it easier on the rookie quarterback. He's also making like a signature awesome play, awesome throw every game. So you're getting that spectacular on top of the efficiency for Jayden Daniels. And that's what's really fun to watch.
100%. I don't have much more to add to it other than If you were power ranking the NFC East right now, are they number one?
I mean, they're in first place. They're
The other teams are struggling.
40 points on everybody. So
yeah, I think so.
It's hard. And it's not like the Cowboys or the Eagles or the Giants are making you believe in them either right now. No. And the Washington Commanders are the only team in that division where you're like, okay, this team is forcing me to believe. I have no choice but to believe in what I'm seeing with the Commanders right now. It's fun to watch.
100%. Yeah, I'm with you. I don't know if it'll maintain, but it's really impressive so far.
We'll get to the rest of those teams in the NFC East. We'll talk unbeaten Minnesota Vikings, who currently own the North, Rashee Rice injury, and a whole lot more from Week 4 of NFL Sunday next. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by Game Time. I get so excited. I got some concerts coming up, Matt. I'm going to see some shows, and I love going on the Game Time app and finding tickets. There's another shows. I was kind of undecided whether or not I was going to go to this concert. I'm like, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to let Game Time let me decide, because I want to get a deal. I want to get those last minute tickets. And there's a new feature on Game Time to help you out, whether you're getting concert tickets, comedy shows, you're going to an NFL game, college football game, whatever sporting event you want. You can find the tickets at Game Time, and Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And by the way, did I mention you can save up to 60% on those last minute tickets with Game Time? So download the Game Time app and take the guesswork out of buying tickets. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. The Minnesota Vikings keep rolling, man. And there's people that might be like, okay, really, Sam Darnold? Nice story to start the season. Maybe there's, we feel a certain way about the talent on the defensive side of the ball. They lose their best pass rusher in the offseason. And they just keep rolling. And 31-20 was the final score here with the Minnesota Vikings and the Green Bay Packers.
31-29.
I'm sorry, 31-29.
Yep, and it got close at the end. 22 fourth quarter points for the Packers.
Yeah, and it was a one-score game at the end of the game. But it didn't feel this close in the fourth quarter. The Packers dropped 22 points to make it a little bit tighter than I think people wanted. It didn't feel that close, even at the end when they had the opportunity. It was one of the situations I really feel like where the Vikings are like, well, you're not going to come back in this, and we're going to try to not let you have the one big play. And so you kind of march down, you keep going, then you play it tight on offense, and you give it back to them a bunch of times. And, maybe you play a little bit too tight if you're the Minnesota Vikings there, but it worked out and they got the win. But they were blowing the doors off the Packers in the first half of this game. It was pretty unbelievable. It was like, wow. Was it 28-7, I think, at halftime in this game? And Sam Darnold continues to play really well, amongst the best passers in the NFL this year. And that was with the Green Bay Packers getting Jordan Love back. And it didn't seem like Jordan Love was going to come back. He didn't really practice much this week. He ends up throwing 54 passes to try to bring the Packers back because they were in a hole early.
Yeah, and last week the narrative was, are the Vikings real? They might be real. Now I think, yeah, they're real. This is a good football team. They're really well coached. I think Darnold's going to come, maybe not to this level, but at a good enough to high level week after week. And I think Aaron Jones is a nice stabilizing force for them. And Jefferson's an utter superstar. Addison's a great number 2, a good number 2, and especially with Hawkinson back in the mix at some point. But if I'm the Packers, I'm not too upset about this, because you mentioned it. Love hasn't played. He hasn't practiced. That's one of the most difficult defenses to deal with anyway, especially if there's rust. I don't love that term. But Love looked like Love in the second half. And I understand there probably was some prevent defenses and things like that he was going against. But I think they'll be just fine. And I also think one of our big fantasy questions from the preseason has been answered in that Jayden Reed is the number 1 here.
He's the slot. We're going to find matchups. You can count on Jayden Reed, I think.
Yeah.
If Christian Watson's not involved, and so if he's hurt and he's out, I think Dontavian Wicks is the one you pick up. And he's had a couple of decent weeks, and he had 2 touchdowns in this game, but he ended up with 13 targets. So he was the most highly targeted player for the Packers offense here and had 2 touchdowns. And to be honest with you, it brings without because Christian Watson's so hit and miss. If it for fantasy purposes, you almost want Christian Watson to be out because then Jayden Reed and Dontavian Wicks both rosterable and probably startable for your fantasy teams if Jordan Love is the quarterback.
And he certainly could Wally Pip Watson. You know what I mean? Like once he's in the starting lineup, he may never leave.
And it could be the situation where we like these other guys and we've got so many that we can trade someone who's so inconsistent and can't stay on the field for us, and Christian Watson, maybe get something big. Who knows? Maybe send him to the Kansas City Chiefs or something like that.
Right. Steelers, Chiefs. I mean, there's a handful of teams. I would take Christian Watson off your hands and give it a try.
Whether it's the deadline or in the offseason. And so then you really have this solid, okay, we got Dobbs as the X, we got Wicks as the Z, and then we've got Jayden Reed's our slot guy, and we target the heck out of him. And then you really understand the depth chart and the pecking order there, if that's the case. And it ends up being the case because Christian Watson keeps getting dinged up and missing games. And I'm sure at some point the Packers are going to get a little frustrated with that and know that they can operate really well without Christian Watson.
100%. And I said I'm not really worried about the Packers. They weathered a Jordan Love storm, but they're 2 games back from a team that they just lost head-to-head to. So, that's not ideal. But I still think they're going to end up in the playoffs. And
when the game was more competitive early, they got whipped by them too.
They did.
Like in their own house, by the way. And so it's not like, you're super worried about the Packers. It's just more about, man, the Minnesota Vikings are really for real. So when you're looking at this season and you think, okay, a couple of weeks in, Sam Darnold, good story, looking pretty good. Third with week 3, all right, beat the 49ers in week 2 is pretty good. Now week 4, okay, division rival at the Packers. Jordan Love's back. Whipped up on them again in the first half. Looked like they were going to run away with that game. And so you really, again, like the Washington Commanders, especially offensively for the Commanders, where the Vikings are playing pretty well on defense too.
They are.
And you're forced to believe at this point. And Sam Darnold, by the way, making himself a lot of money, might get whether it's with the Vikings or somebody else next week, because he's going to be a free agent. He might be starter. He might
be a week 1 starter in 2025 somewhere.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. At the very least, he's got himself the same gig as a stopgap, but maybe even longer term.
They trade McCarthy. Who knows?
Especially if you're from that McVay Shanahan tree and you need a quarterback that can run that system. And he's been super impressive and hasn't been making a bunch of mistakes. And so, good on Sam Darnold. Good on the Minnesota Vikings side. There, you have to believe. You have no choice.
One other note for the Packers, their corner situation isn't great. And with Jari Alexander out, it got really not great.
Can we go to the Pittsburgh Steelers next?
Sure.
The Indianapolis Colts were a team that I did not believe in at all. And even with the Steelers going on the road, I was really shocked. And I didn't watch a lot of this game. And I usually watch less of the Steelers games just because I know you're going to be so tuned into them. And I always want to hear what you have to say about them. But when I did start watching, I felt a little bit bad for Fields. I felt like, because, depending on how you look at the quarterback position and offensive lines and sacks, some people say the sacks are all on the quarterback. I think it's kind of like a 50-50 split. But I just felt like with Justin Fields, it's always more difficult than it feels like it needs to be. He's looking the wrong way when a ball gets snapped, but it's probably the rookie center's fault. It's like, but it keeps happening to Fields. So is it Fields' fault, or has he just been on bad offensive line teams with bad offensive lines, or with offensive lines that are putting him in predicament or in precarious situations? But the Steelers fought back in this game, got within a score, and then that last drive thwarted again. And it's always just looks a little bit too difficult for Justin Fields at times. But really, this game in the first half was the Steelers falling in a hole against the Colts, and it's something I didn't really see coming. And that was really, they were down before Joe Flacco even entered the picture. And by the way, that's a whole conversation with Anthony Richardson, and now Joe Flacco maybe doing for the Colts what he did for the Browns last year.
Yep, I think there's a possibility. So Richardson didn't last long, but he was pretty sharp, and he was playing well early. And frankly, the Colts were playing at a different speed than the Steelers for the first 2 or 3 drives of this game on both sides of the ball. The hitting, the physicality, the speed. They were what looked like a desperate team against a somewhat lethargic Steelers start. And it was more than the Steelers could overcome. I mean, from that point on, I thought the Steelers were probably the better team. but they had too many mistakes. I mean, turnovers and botched snaps and goofy stuff like that are correctable, but this team can't overcome. But in the last 4 or 5 years, the Steeler offense would have ended up with 200 yards and would have lost this game by 20. Now they end up with over 400 yards, which hasn't happened in forever, and came back and made it very, very interesting. And frankly, when it was coming down to the end, I thought they were going to win or were the better team. But I give the Colts a lot of credit. I give Flacco a lot of credit. They had a really good game plan, especially early. Flacco was very, very sharp, especially on third downs. Downs and Pittman were phenomenal. Colts O-line was really, really good. So we'll see. But it's a totally different world when Flacco's in there than Richardson, of course.
Oh, yeah, it's a different game. And
yeah,
it's when bad Richardson is playing, it's almost like the Carolina thing. You throw in the red rifle and it's like, okay, it's different. And it's traditional and okay, we're going to operate and run the ball a little bit and the efficiency goes up. And I think that's what we saw with Flacco in there. And clearly Richardson, I think more people would believe in how he's played. And I like the way he started his career last year before he got hurt. And it's tough for a young quarterback who hasn't played a lot of football, but he's consistently hurt now. And so you do have to start worrying about that. And if Flacco comes out and looks better than your young quarterback, it just makes the picture cloudier for the Indianapolis Colts, which is unfortunate because you want to celebrate the win if you're the Colts, who, by the way, so this is why I was so down on the Colts. The first 3 weeks of the season, they had an NFL worst 6 interceptions, and they were averaging the lowest in the NFL time of possession, 21 minutes and 36 seconds. Lowest
3 minutes less than number 31. Like a distant 32.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is, the last time a team had the ball less over the first 3 games, it was the expansion 1999 Cleveland Browns. Is one of the worst teams of all time.
Trust me, I dug in this team heavy. There were some weird splits.
I mean,
but their explosiveness on offense scared me from the beginning, and the Pittmans of the world certainly prefer Minshew or Flacco. I'll tell you that.
It's why you don't crown teams in September. And it was really good for Colts and Colts fans to be able to see them wake up, because they were sleeping through the first 3 weeks of the season and beat a team in the Steelers, who, especially against the Steelers defense, which I still think is one of the best in the league.
I do too, and this was definitely their worst game. But I think there's a lot of offensive talent in between Taylor, Pittman, Downs, a really good O-line, and it showed up.
Real quick, by the way, speaking of September versus January, going back to Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry by month yards per carry in his career.
It's insane, isn't it?
He's sub 4 yards per carry in September, 3.98 yards per carry. October goes up a little bit, 4.5 yards per carry. November goes up a little bit more, 4.94 yards per carry. So November versus September is a full yard per carry. December, guess what? Goes up a little bit more, 5.11 yards per carry. January goes up again, 5.8 and almost 6 yards per carry in January. So Derrick Henry, if you can still, probably too late to trade for him now, but
might just be getting warmed up.
Yeah, you got to be excited for that trend if you are a Derrick Henry owner in fantasy league.
He's like the anti-Tua. Tua does the opposite, like trade Tua by Halloween,
Yeah, trade. So draft Tua, trade Tua for Derrick Henry in the last week of September. All right, a whole lot more from week 4 next. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Whenever we reference lines on this podcast, and we do picks every single week, those lines are coming from FanDuel, which is America's #1 sportsbook. And NFL fans right now can get a big return on FanDuel with $200 in free bonus bets guaranteed. And all you got to do is place your first $5 bet. More on that in a second. And when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, maybe you're watching Monday Night Football and you want to check the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, you can find it all on the same page where you're placing your bets at FanDuel.com. So download the FanDuel app, go to FanDuel.com, sign up. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. You don't even have to win that $5 bet to get $200 extra to play with at FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. Download the app, and that is FanDuel.com. Let's go to the New Orleans Saints. Who had a nice divisional battle. The Saints kind of coming back down to earth the last couple of weeks. The Arizona Atlanta Falcons stumbled to start the year, and guess what? Everybody's 500 now. The Saints 2-2 fall 26-24 to the Falcons, who are now 2-2 as well in the NFC South.
Yeah, and I feel like it's a pretty equal battle, and I think Atlanta's offense is really rounding into shape, but they needed some bounces. Let's just put it that way. I mean, Koo had to hit a bunch of field goals, one from 58 to win it. There was some muffed punt stuff like that in their advantage, but I thought this was a pretty equal battle that if they played 7 times, it'd probably go Falcons 4, Saints 3,
they're just going to do the old Saints Falcons split home and home.
Yeah, probably. And Tampa will be right in that mix too.
Get on Young Wei Koo for the game winner, 58 yards. And there was more misses this week, by the way. It's not automatic, but we're still seeing a lot of those 58-yard field goals.
Yeah, but people are trying them left and right.
How about the Chicago Bears? 2-2 now, 24-18 win over the 1-3 Los Angeles Rams. And the Rams this week looked like they did in the first half last week. Beat up. And they're injured all over the place. And the Chicago Bears were able to take advantage. And don't look now, Bears and Packers got both 2-2 now. We'll see what happens on Monday Night Football with the Detroit Lions. If they lose to the Seahawks, who are 3-0, you might have 3 teams at 2-2 looking up at the Minnesota Vikings in the North.
Yeah, and I give the Bears credit. I mean, their run game was much better. Maybe we can start trusting DeAndre Swift, but you mix in the other guys. You take a lot off Caleb Williams' plate. I mean, they asked him to throw 1 million times last week, and that was not a good recipe. Only 23 attempts in this one. And I also thought the Rams' lack of talent shows up here too. I mean, like the O-line's beat up. The back 7 on defense isn't great. And you're throwing Tutu Atwell, Jordan Whittingham, Demarcus Robinson, Colby Parkinson, all of whom are fine players, but none's even close to a number 2, let alone a 1,
And it's so key for Swift to get going because he didn't even look like an NFL running back the first couple of weeks. And the line play has been bad for the Bears. And so for them to be able to run the ball, keep heat off of their rookie quarterback is so huge. And they were able to do that in this game. And this is how you draw it up. And you got your rookie quarterback. You're like, let's run the ball. Let's keep him secure and safe and blocked up and don't have to have him drop him back 100 times, on 3rd and longs all day long. And they were able to stay in front of the sticks in this game against the Los Angeles Rams. And the Rams, the Rams are in bad shape despite Stafford and McVay, despite the big win last week coming back on the 49ers. I'm all
could be a long year.
Rams. Yeah.
It could be a long year.
Very long year for the Rams. How ugly was the Broncos and Jets game? 10-9 win for the Denver Broncos, who are 2-2. The Jets now at 2-2. The Jets have looked awful twice, looked great twice. But this is concerning if you at home against the Broncos and a rookie quarterback who had at one point had 7 completions and -7 yards passing in the first half of the game. And you can only muster 9 points in this game. And you can't beat the Denver Broncos. Like, that's not a good sign for the New York Jets.
No. And I didn't even think Rodgers was terrible, but I also felt like Surtain versus Wilson didn't leave the Jets a lot else. And Broncos offense is a slog, and there was weather, and this was a tough watch of all the games, probably the least entertaining. But my biggest takeaway, and this has been true really for the entire season, the Broncos defense, especially their front, is pretty darn good. Like, one of the most underrated players in the whole league is Zach Allen, and the Benitos and those type of dudes are pretty darn good, and they gave the Jets fits.
And I don't think we have to talk a lot about this ugly game, but the last stat, which is insane. And so Bo Nix did get on the positive side passing yards, ended up with 60 passing yards. Didn't throw any interceptions, at least 1 touchdown, but 60 passing yards, 12 of 25. So 12 completions for 60 yards. Cortland Sutton, all 60 of the yards. 3 catches for 60 yards and a touchdown.
Yeah, that's not going to yield many more wins, even at 10-9.
I mean, gosh, I can't believe the Broncos are 2-2 right now.
It maybe, like, I have mixed feelings about Sean Payton. I don't know that he's at the Harbaugh Tomlin level anymore since he left the league and came back. But that team was horrible last year and won 8 games. They look horrible this year and they're 500. Like, there's something to that.
I want to talk about the Panthers, who made it interesting against the Cincinnati Bengals, though. But Jamar Chase starting to look a lot like vintage Jamar Chase, and he's just so dynamic, even though the stat line isn't huge for him in this game. 34-24 win for the Cincinnati Bengals. But the Panthers, real quick, is kind of, and obviously the Bengals had to win this game. You can't fall 0-4. So 1-3 now on the season for both of these teams, the Bengals and the Panthers. But the Panthers, we kind of talked about this with, the Flacco-led Colts and how it might look a little bit different, what the Colts were able to do in that game against the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Chicago Bears. And it's really telling sometimes when you change quarterbacks and all of a sudden run the ball better. And that's what the Panthers have been able to do. And Chuba Hubbard in 100 yards per game. And, the offensive line isn't, trying to block for, third and longs as often. And it just kind of starts to change the whole picture when you're able to stay in front of the sticks, even if you're not a super dynamic offense.
100%. And I think it's clear Dalton's a legit quarterback and makes all the difference in the world. And I thought these were two really bad defenses, though. I'm worried about Cincinnati's defense, and both these teams had success on the ground, had a fair amount of success in the air. Since he's just more talented with a better quarterback, and Chase is better than Deontay, you know what I mean? But I was not impressed with either defense at all. I mean, 0 sacks in this game, not a lot of pressure, didn't make things very difficult on the opponent.
Yeah, and for the Bengals, it's like, okay, cool, you beat the worst team in the league. Like,
yeah, good. Now you've got your first win.
You didn't lose to the worst team in the league, and maybe who knows? Maybe the Panthers aren't the worst team in the league anymore. But they're still 32 in my power rankings. The Philadelphia Eagles, I don't know what to think about this team, and really, on the opposite end, I don't know what to think about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who just took it to the Eagles at home. 3-1 now are the Buccaneers. 2-2 Eagles. 33-16 the final score there. And I know the Eagles are missing some pass catchers, what makes things a little bit more difficult, but just really up and down play for the Philadelphia Eagles so far this year, and mostly up play for the Buccaneers this year.
I'm really mad at myself for picking the Eagles in this game for a couple reasons, because Todd Bowles absolutely has Hurts' number, and I think Hurts is a little bit concerning, to be honest with you. And Baker is playing really well, and it's not just a Canales thing. I think he's here to stay as a legit quarterback. And the Eagles have some major injuries, and especially at wide receiver. But when I heard Lane Johnson wasn't playing, I'm like, oh man, why did I pick the Eagles? Like they lost at both lines of scrimmage, which is not an Eagle thing traditionally. They're weaker on both lines than they've been during this stretch. You know what I mean? Bucs are good. I think the Bucs are a good team.
Absolutely. The Houston Texans hang on to defeat and actually had to come back to the fourth quarter touchdown to defeat the Jacksonville Jaguars. So Texans improved to 3-1. Jags, who we already kind of buried last week, are 0-4. And obviously you can start to kiss playoffs goodbye if you're the Jacksonville Jaguars and you're really on head coach watch, and just like it feels all bad in Jacksonville right now. And even when they have an opportunity to win, they still can't, to beat a division rival. That would have been huge for them to knock off the Texans and be 1-3 instead of 0-4 now.
I thought the Jags offense showed little more signs of life, but I'm already getting questions like, are they the first, staff fired? And I definitely lean towards yes. Can a team, we talked about Watson, could a team pry Christian Kirk away from him? I'm starting to think that's probably the path this season goes. And Houston's really good. I feel like I'm wanting more from them, though. I mean, and maybe that's just a slight plexiglass principle thing. Like you took that huge step forward and now you didn't take another one. You're just kind of hovering or took a slight step back, and you'll get it figured out by the end of the year.
Yeah. And everyone was crowning the Texans before the season started, and was like, okay, well, maybe we slow the roll a little bit on them. They're still not quite the juggernaut that we all expected to see here. And yeah, maybe a little bit more of a plateau than another step up from the huge step up they took last year.
Yeah. And Stroud's great, and the coaching staff's good, and Will Anderson and all that stuff. I mean, they're going to be in the mix.
Yeah, and it's fine, and it's good for the Texans, but it's not quite dominating fashion. They've been, and I'm interested to see how they look against some other better teams as we continue this season. The 49ers absolutely mopped the floor with the Patriots. The Patriots have maybe the worst offensive line play in the NFL. I mean, it's unbelievable how many. It was a half a dozen sacks by the 49ers defensive line. It was such a huge get-right game for the Niners. 30-13 was the final. It really didn't even feel that close. There was a fumbled kickoff at the beginning of the second half, which led to the only Patriots touchdown. They got the ball, inside the 10-yard line and were able to just there. But I just feel bad for Jacoby Brissett. He's a punching bag. He's just getting hit so much, and it's not like he's great at getting the ball out quick right now either. And if they were able to block anybody, they'd probably have the rookie Drake May in there. But do you sit Drake May the whole season? Because you don't want to subject him to what we saw Jacoby Brissett. But Jacoby Brissett's going to be hurt, and you have no choice at some point. That's what he's getting hit.
That's what I was going to say. Is I fear this decision will be made for us with the beating he's taken, and he's tough as could be. And I'm a Brissett fan, but he has very little chance. And Bosa and company, as you said, got right.
The Las Vegas Raiders victorious over the Cleveland Browns, 20-16. Browns offense awful. Deshaun Watson awful.
Yeah.
And the Raiders didn't look great, but they were good enough on this day at home to beat the Cleveland Browns.
I give them credit too. I mean, I looked at like the Bears and Raiders run game and thought, man, they're not going to run that ball all year. The terrible units. And it wasn't great, but it was 152 yards on the ground against a quality defense when it's said and done without Adams, and it was good enough. I mean, this was an underwhelming game for me. It didn't have my attention all that much. I mean, it was not great quarterback play, decent defenses, but I don't think either one of these teams is really going anywhere at this point.
Yeah. Was it good defenses or bad offenses?
Yeah.
Lean toward bad offensive play for the most part.
Me too.
And so I just looked at two teams that are not very good and kind of evenly matched. And it was a evenly matched game. And good on the Raiders at home for being able to come back from a 10-point deficit, and the Browns couldn't get anything going after the first quarter.
Yeah. I mean, at least the Raiders are 2-2, and they're win any way you can. I get that, but I don't have high hopes for either one of those teams.
Last one here. Good news for the Kansas City Chiefs as they improved to 4-0, defeating the Los Angeles Chargers 17-10. Bad news for them, and it's the same story as last year, so maybe it doesn't matter because they still won the Super Bowl, is they've got some problems at wide receiver with Shea Rice. It looks like a torn ACL now, and he's going to be done for the year, and he was far and away their best receiving weapon this year, including Travis Kelce.
One of the worst guys for them to lose. That's not named Mahomes or Jones or, maybe even like a Humphrey, somebody like that, because he was the foundation of the passing game. And Kelce stepped up and played really, really well. As we know, he's capable. But what we don't know if he's capable of is, can you do it the rest of the way and be the workhorse receiver for this offense for 18 more games, hopefully, and, raise a trophy again? I have my doubts. I mean, that puts a lot of pressure on the Xavier Worthies of the world. I guess Hunt is the back now. I mean, us idiots that started Carson Steele on our fantasy team because they had to weren't happy with that turn of events. But
two carries in this one after he led the team in carries last year.
I think he fumbled really early on too, and then just disappeared. He did. Yeah,
rookies have such a short leash, and you just never, when you think,
one mistake,
here's the week for the guy, it doesn't happen. Xavier Worthy, though, did have the 54-yarder, so maybe that's the answer for them at wide receiver. A rookie that now has gone through his first month of NFL life, and can he be at least a big play weapon for them? I think they could probably target him a little bit more underneath. He's not just a pure speed guy, in my opinion. It's the reason they went up and got him in the first round of the draft. So I do like Xavier Worthy right now to be able to pick up some of the Rashee Rice slack. They're just such different players, too. So Travis Kelce's going to have to become the target hog there. And that's kind of what we saw in this game.
Yeah, and I think we all know the Chiefs have a good defense, and that's more their foundation at the moment, which is great. But I think the Chargers should probably hold their head high, too. I mean, like, Herbert shouldn't have been out there hobbling around. Their defense is legit as well. I thought it was maybe it was a little fluky to start the season. I mean, they had both tackles out. I mean, Derwin James was suspended. Bosa was out. And you hung with the Super Bowl champs. Give them credit,
And speaking of rookie wide receivers, Ladd McConkey heating up a little bit here in week 4.
So promising. I know you lost, but promising.
That is week 4 Sunday. We've got one more. Actually, excuse me. We got 2 more dual Monday nighters, which we will cover on tomorrow's show. Get your questions in from week 4 in our weekly mailbag at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL, or drop a question in the YouTube comments. Subscribe while you're there or anywhere you listen to your podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen. For your second listen, remember, your team is covered right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Matt and I back tomorrow. Peacock and Williamson.